But arguably the most extraordinary story of an African American during the gold rush belongs to Mifflin Wistar Gibbs. In early 1850, Mifflin Wistar Gibbs was in Rochester, New York. He was dejected and depressed. The 27-year-old free African American from Philadelphia had just completed a whirlwind tour throughout the eastern United States as an assistant to the famous abolitionist Frederick Douglass. With Douglass's speaking tour finished and the excitement fading, Gibbs felt that his prospects were severely limited. As he later wrote, quote, "The outlook for my future, to me, was not promising," unquote. Mifflin confided his gloom to Julia Griffiths, the British anti-slavery leader and a colleague of Frederick Douglass. Griffiths responded with 7 words that changed Gibbs' life. She said, quote, "What? Discouraged? Go do some great thing," unquote. Armed with this powerful directive from Griffiths and a ticket provided by a sympathetic friend, Gibbs booked passage on the steamship Golden Gate and headed toward the distant realm of the dreamers, Gold Rush, California. He had all his possessions in a trunk and 60 cents in his pocket. It was bold, audacious, but as Gibbs would note in his autobiography, quote, "Fortune may sometimes smile on the inert, but she seldom fails to surrender to pluck, tenacity, and perseverance," unquote. Mifflin Wistar Gibbs arrived in San Francisco in September 1850. After paying 50 cents to have his trunk delivered to his lodgings, Gibbs immediately spent his remaining few pennies on a cigar to celebrate his arrival in the land of golden opportunity. Over the next decade, his California experience would see success and disappointment, exhilaration and exasperation. In San Francisco, Mifflin Wistar Gibbs would quickly rise from bootblack to prominent merchant and newspaper publisher. He would be on the cutting edge of the effort to secure rights and respect for the African American community during the gold rush. Gibbs did not fully succeed, but he never lost hope that his people would ultimately triumph over discrimination. The journey would be twisting and rugged. Disgusted by the apparently ceaseless assaults on their rights and dignity, discouraged and infuriated by proposed anti-black immigration and residency restrictions proposed by the California legislature, several hundred African Americans sought a new home where they would find tolerance, opportunity, and acceptance. This promised land appeared to be underpopulated British Columbia, which was itself in the early days of a gold rush. In April 1858, a vanguard of 200 embarked on an exodus to Victoria, British Columbia, aboard the sailing ship Commodore. Mifflin Wistar Gibbs offered a farewell address and was seriously considering joining the migration himself, as were hundreds of others. As positive word filtered back from the Victoria migrants, plans were accelerated for additional settlers to head north. Ultimately, more than 500 African Americans would join their earlier arrivals in Victoria and Vancouver. In fact, nearly 15% of all blacks in California migrated to British Columbia during this period. After serious thought, Mifflin Wistar Gibbs decided to go to British Columbia. He left San Francisco in June 1858. He carried with him stores of supplies needed by the settlement, and upon arrival in Victoria, Gibbs immediately flourished as a merchant. The community was succeeding too. Letters home described that nearly all the jobs in Victoria were held by blacks, that the migrants had purchased considerable tracts of land, and that the police force, the only police force, was the black unit known as the Victoria Pioneer Rifle Corps. But British Columbia was not idyllic. The British Columbia Gold Rush included Americans harboring the prejudices and racial attitudes very familiar to the African American community. Tension between these old adversaries was inevitable, but in general, these new black Canadians found support and protection from the British government and clergy. Today, a plaque in Victoria honors these black pioneers, and a one-man show highlights the experiences of Gibbs in Victoria. It was a remarkable story. Mifflin Wistar Gibbs sunk roots in the new colony. He became one of the wealthiest men in Victoria. His 5 children were born in British Columbia, and he was elected to the Victoria City Council. But he could not escape intolerance and social indignities. In 1861, while attending the theater, a white bigot objected to sitting in the same section with Mifflin Wistar Gibbs and threw a container of flour on Gibbs and his wife. When the American Civil War ended, prospects for African Americans initially appeared brighter in the United States. While the members of the California Exodus had pledged allegiance to the British Crown, many retained unbroken loyalties to family, friends, and the United States. A reverse migration followed. While hundreds of blacks remained in Canada, a significant portion of the migrant community ended their voluntary exile and returned to the United States, some to California, where they resumed their former lives. Among those starting anew in the United States was Mifflin Wistar Gibbs. After more than 10 years in Victoria, Gibbs migrated to Ohio. There he obtained a law degree at the age of 50. After hearing of promising potential in Arkansas, Gibbs moved to Little Rock in 1871 and hung up his legal shingle. Within 2 years, Gibbs was appointed county attorney in Pulaski County, and in 1873 he was elected municipal judge in Little Rock. His election generated national interest as the majority of the voters were white, and he was the first elected African American judge in United States history. In 1897, Judge Gibbs was selected by President William McKinley to be United States Consul for Madagascar. Mifflin Wistar Gibbs died in 1915 at the age of 92. His passing came 65 years after the abolitionist Julia Griffiths had urged the nearly penniless young man to go do some great thing. It is likely that Griffiths would have felt that Mifflin Wistar Gibbs, California Gold Rush civil rights champion, defiant migrant, successful merchant, respected lawyer, city council member, county attorney, judge, federal official, and ambassador, had succeeded in doing some great thing.